Formula One on 5 Live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to round 16 of the 2025 Formula One World Championship. It's the Italian Grand Prix weekend at the Temple of Speed in Monza. The grandstand's already getting filled out with dedicated tifosi. It was a sea of orange last week in Zandvoort, but we're very much red for this weekend. Free practice one coming up in a few moments' time. It's Harry Benjamin with you in the commentary box, and our eyes and ears on the ground with the best view of the Ferrari diehards. It's Jenny Gow. Afternoon, Jen.
Good afternoon, Harry. Thank you so much. And the crowds, as you say, are one of the main features of coming here to Monza. The Temple of Speed, as you say, the podium just hanging above the pit lane and partly overseeing the racetrack. And coming in this morning, all the fans were just walking towards the track every which way you looked. And this track is so special, set in Royal Parklands, the dappled shade created by the trees. It was heavy rain and storms last night, but now beautiful blue skies, some white fluffy clouds, and the reception for one man, Lewis Hamilton, is phenomenal. I can't tell you how excited every fan is, it seems like, in the grandstands. A sea of red, as you said, Harry.
Yeah, I'm going to say it, and people will have a go, but this will be officially his first Italian Grand Prix for Ferrari. Obviously, we had Imola earlier in the year, but technically that's not branded as the Italian Grand Prix, and Monza very much a staple of the calendar, actually celebrating 75 years at Monza. What a historic place to go racing. Got the old banking as well, where the Formula One cars used to race around, still visible for the pundits in the general admission, able to wander around this beautiful Royal Park here at the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. And it's Alice Powell, British racing driver, who is back alongside me in the commentary box. You've raced around this very track, Alice. I mean, there's a lot of driver, a lot of fan favourites up and down the grid, but Monza always seems to stand above the rest.
It does, and it's one of my favourites, that is for sure. It's quite different to many of the circuits that are on the calendar. Very low downforce, so we see pretty much every single team on the grid, or bar those slightly further down the order, with the likes of Alpine and Sauber that have bought, say, upgrades. They're not really upgrades. Red Bull have got something, got the rear wing config from last year on their car, but people have basically just made slight changes because you want to get rid of that drag, because you've got such a long straight, the main straight 1.1 kilometre long, which you're aided with DRS, but you've got heavy braking zones, so it's particularly tricky. You take all that downforce off, and then you add in with the heavy braking zones. It's a tricky circuit. It looks like you just brake, turn on the gas, but it's of course not as simple as that.
Yeah, we're going to see some pretty skinny rear wings, I think, as the teams try and take as much depth out of them as possible to try and gain that straight line speed. Long start finish straight from pole to the turn one braking zone. It's just over 470 metres long before you get to the Rettifilo chicane. A quick right, left. Of course, you are punished here. There are runoff areas, but there is grass and there is gravel as well. And then you curve your way round the Curva Grande, turn 3, before you slam on the brakes. Another chicane, the Della Rocha chicane, the left-right of 4 and 5. Then it's a double right-hander, turn 6 and 7. The two Lesmos lead you onto a short blast down to the Ascari chicane, a complex of 3 corners, left, then right, then left again, and that takes you down the back straight towards the Parabolica. Slopes round to the right hand side, turn 11, and that sees you back around a lap of this Monza track. 5.793 kilometres, just over 3.5 miles long, where you are reaching speeds of over 350 kilometres an hour. They call it the Temple of Speed for a reason, and that is why. Coming in to round 16, let's bring you up to speed with how the standings lie. And it was a big blow to Lando Norris last time out in Zandvoort, retiring his car. 0 points picked up from him. That means the gap now to the championship leader, Oscar Piastri, stands at 34 points. Max Verstappen is a further 70 points adrift of Norris. Then it's George Russell and Charles Leclerc, the top 5, with McLaren leading the Constructors' Championship by over 300 points. Ferrari second, with Mercedes and Red Bull in fourth. Williams leading the charge in the midfield. Behind them, though, a tight battle between Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Sauber and Haas, with Alpine just slightly further adrift at the back end of the field. But the cars have now headed out into the pit lane and are out onto the circuit. Green light on then for free practice 1. And for those who wish to do a sync up, the clock is coming your way now. It's 59 minutes and 37 seconds remaining as Nico Hülkenberg and his Sauber teammate Gabriel Bortoleto are the first to peel out on track. Lando Norris comes out now. The sun glints off the orange of his McLaren. And Alice, this is a big weekend for Lando Norris after that retirement last week. It's really a must-win weekend for him.
It is, but we still have 274 points available. So there's a lot of points still left to get. Yeah, I did that instantly. There's still a lot of points available. He, of course, just needs to really outscore Oscar Piastri. A lot easier said than done, of course, but there's plenty of things that can go wrong. We never expect a retirement, a mechanical failure, and it's happened to Lando Norris. Less than 8 laps from the end of the Grand Prix last weekend, cost him 18 points. That could happen to Oscar. There could be an incident. If you can never rule out with if you chuck Verstappen up in there, he knows these two need to be careful. If let's say Verstappen's qualified second, he's in a McLaren sandwich, he's going to go for a gap. He's going to get stuck in. He doesn't care if it's going to ruin the championship hopes of either one of those. You just never know. And Lando was actually quite calm, I think, after the Dutch Grand Prix. He said he's put it behind him when he spoke to the media yesterday. And that's the best thing he can do, because it was totally out of his control. Oscar had a great weekend, racking up all the points, basically. Got a clean sweep as well. So coming to this circuit, it's a tricky lap 1 when you go into that first corner. I
think that's something Lando Norris has gotten really good at, is being able to just be in the moment and allow to whatever's happened to him happen. Here's team radio.
We need to put the headrest pads on when I come back in, if possible.
Understood.
If you don't quite recognise that voice, it is because it is not a regular driver. That is Alex Dunn, who is in for the championship leader, Oscar Piastri, getting another FP1 outing. The Irish driver currently competing in Formula 2, just 19 years of age, has impressed so far, and is getting another run out there, and just requesting some headrest pads when he comes back in to try and make himself feel a little bit more comfortable in the cockpit of that McLaren. Piastri will be back in for free practice 2 later on this afternoon. Just to come back to Norris, though, I think that is one thing he's become really good at, is allowing those moments to happen and then just leaving them where they are and moving on. It was an engine oil line problem which ultimately led to the retirement of Lando Norris. It wasn't a Mercedes power unit issue, it was on the McLaren chassis side. And I suppose we actually had Abby Pulling in last weekend, and she was saying during this year, during her GP3 campaign, and I feel like this could probably be applied to most drivers across the field. When you're driving in cars and there are issues that are outside of your control, like reliability issues, other drivers crashing into you, etc. How hard is that to get over and to become adjusted to?
It's difficult because teams take that into account. We're just having a onboard with listen to the onboard of Lando Norris, who doesn't really have a lockup going into turn 1, but for some reason decides he doesn't want to take the apex and take down to the escape road. It's difficult because there's a lot of pressure, whether you're a young driver like Abby coming up through the junior categories, that has expectations of the driver, has expectations of the team, and of course it can be so frustrating if things out of your control then hinder you to achieve those goals, or hinder you to achieve the progress, essentially. It's frustrating, and Lando dealt with it the best way possible. And like you said, Harry, there's no point stressing over it. There's no point giving your energy to something that you literally cannot control. He could have not done anything. It couldn't have done anything different.
It has left, though, a visible gap in the championship standings, and while there are still many races still to go, Lando Norris needs to win the next 5 races, with Piastri in second in each of them to take back the lead of the championship. However, of course, reliability issues can crop up for both Norris or Piastri once more, so there is still a long way to go in this 2025 battle. Cars out on track, though, getting up to speed in the swing of things. First lap times being set by Verstappen, currently fastest, a 1:22.644 on the medium tyre. However, Lewis Hamilton in that Ferrari, making his way around the Parabolica now, fastest in all, or the first 2 sectors, and the final one. He goes to the top of the times, a 1:22.235, and I'm sure, even in early stages of FP1, Jenny, there'll be a roar from the grandstands for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a smattering of applause, I would say. They wouldn't get it too excited. The Monza Tifosi are quite knowledgeable about what they see and what they do, so they know at this early stage it's nothing to write home about, but it's a good sign. There's some disappointment. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton has a 5-place grid penalty going into this round after infringement before the last race even begun. Why it wasn't investigated and dealt with last time out, I have no idea. He doesn't either, but there we go. That is life, and he'll just have to hope he can overtake round here on Sunday. But actually, looking at the cars, they are really smart this weekend. They've done it up in tribute to Niki Lauda, someone who Lewis Hamilton knew very, very well. So he's got a tribute helmet, all yellow and gold and white, and there's a flash of white on the back of the, well, it's more than a flash of white, but there is a white rear end on that Ferrari. It's paid tribute to the great Niki Lauda.
Yeah, it's a dollop of white, I think I would call it.
Term?
That's what I think I actually saw that in a press release, so we're going to go with that as the technical term. It's to pay homage, exactly as you say, Jenny, to Niki Lauda and the Ferrari 312T from 1975, Lauda's first championship victory 50 years ago, which was sealed right here in Monza. He didn't win the race, his teammate Claire Regazzoni did, but Lauda finished third. They've even gone one step further, and they've got the driver names, so Leclerc and Hamilton written in cursive script in the same font that was on Lauda's 1975 car, and also have the numbers as well written in black and white with a rectangular background too. So really going all out Ferrari there, as Lando Norris pops himself up into the fastest position, half a second in front of Charles Leclerc, with Hamilton in third. So the 2 Ferraris, second and third right now. Lawson and Verstappen now the top 5, Jen.
Harry, I'm very much a details person, and I wish they'd have sewn the Hamilton and Leclerc onto those overalls. They're printed, and it's lovely graphics, but I just think it'd be better stitched.
Yeah, well, feed that back. I think I saw Piero Ferrari in the back of the garage, so feed that back.
No, I said no. A hard no this time.
We'll let you handle that one. But yeah, certainly Monza, always an excuse to show tribute as well. So that's very nice from them. But it is going to be disappointing, because no matter where Lewis Hamilton qualifies, he's going to be docked 5 positions. Now, this is a yellow flag infringement that was actually flagged. It was on the reconnaissance lap on the way to the grid in the Dutch Grand Prix. He did lift off, but the stewards deemed that he didn't lift off enough, and Hamilton wasn't particularly happy about that. Do you think that should have been dealt with across the Zandvoort weekend rather than have a carry-on effect to this weekend?
I mean, 100%. They had the whole race to decide. They had the whole sort of 40 minutes lead up before the start of the Grand Prix to look at it. Why, they'll have their own reasons, I'm sure, but it was baffling. So it is a shame for Lewis. He could have served the penalty during the race, which then he wouldn't come here to have to serve the penalty. But he needs a good weekend, doesn't he, Lewis? It is. We know he's a fantastic driver, and no one out there, certainly me, from being a driver, you don't want to see a driver down in the dumps, and it's the pressure environment. Doesn't matter if it'd be Lewis Hamilton with all those 105 career wins. It's still difficult, and he's got 109 points this season, and that's the lowest total he's ever scored in the opening 15 rounds of a Formula One season. And I can tell you what, he wasn't expecting that stat coming into this year with Ferrari, and he's kind of been in the shadow of Charles Leclerc, and that mistake, we don't see mistakes often, do we, from Lewis Hamilton? You could say technically there were 2 mistakes, one before the Grand Prix and then one during the Grand Prix.
You don't, do you? That it was, I think he said in the press conference, there were a few factors coming into that mistake on the track in turn 3, Hugenholtz, that hugely banked left-hander where Hamilton found the wall and ultimately became the first of the Ferrari retirements before Charles Leclerc got biffed off later in the race by Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes. So certainly they're looking to bounce back after a double DNF off Ferrari. Where better to do it than here? Charles Leclerc won the race here last year, and I think Ferrari should go fairly decently here, but we'll wait and see how that pans out over the course of the weekend. The pressure, we say that word so often, very much on the prancing horse. Pressure too for the man I just mentioned, Alice, Kimi Antonelli, the Italian driver, the 19-year-old, the rookie, the man who had the unfortunate pleasure of replacing Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. Now his rookie year hasn't gone, I think, quite to plan, certainly as he would have liked it, and really it was here last year where it all went a little bit south, and he had, on his first flying lap, or second flying lap I think it might have been, found himself in the wall. And I feel like that's had a real detrimental effect on Antonelli and his mentality since.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think he had a fairly decent start to the year. He obviously got that sprint pole in Miami. But then just when they get to that mid-season where pressure starts to ramp up, everyone starts to settle in terms of where upgrades are, and you go, right, okay, this is pretty much where everybody's pace is now, and it will fluctuate slightly, but not as much as it does at the start of the season. We had that Verstappen talk, those rumours, is he going to move over to Mercedes? That's all died down now, and he needs to start digging, and that mistake that he made was a little bit of a rookie mistake, I would say, going into turn 3 at Zandvoort last weekend. It was more desperation, I think. He was like, right, I can get past the Ferrari here, I can be the hero, and it's very rare that you make a move like that stick. He did actually go to Ferrari, and team principal Fred Vasseur said that Antonelli popped by, did apologise, held his hands up, said, yeah, it's my mistake, I apologise. And Toto Wolff said it's all part of his year of learning, but he certainly needs to have a better weekend. His last home weekend, Imola, didn't go to plan. He said prior to the weekend that he's learned plenty from Imola. And actually it's interesting the comments that he made, because he said, I've learned how to deal with a home race weekend. As in, it sounded like he was maybe stretched himself a little bit too much, whether he had too much family there, too many friends there. I think
he invited half his school class, didn't he? Or if not the entire class.
That was always going to be a distraction. So he said he's learned from that, and he's much more prepared going into this weekend. So let's see.
And that was a proper home race for him, because he's born in Bologna, so in the Emilia-Romagna region, which is where Imola is held. So I think you're right. And as long as Mercedes continue to see that learning and improvement, they'll be satisfied. Verstappen on the radio?
Yeah, tires are starting to slide a little bit more in general.
Okay, copy that.
So that's Max Verstappen. Tyres are starting to slide a little bit more, so reporting back a little bit of wear. Expect it was graining that was a bit of an issue last year during the race. Last year the track had just been resurfaced, but now a year on from that, so it should be a little bit grippier, and we've got some support action in place as well. Just to finish on the Antonelli point, and we heard Verstappen there, who's now fastest, by the way, 1:21.166 on the medium tyre, 2.5 tenths clear of Lando Norris. A few comparisons, Alice, have been made between Verstappen and Kimi Antonelli in their rookie years. Verstappen made mistakes. Is this Antonelli making those same mistakes? Because this phrase generational talent was mentioned around Antonelli, and while he had stellar junior career, probably right up until Formula 2, are we seeing the same signs that we saw from Max Verstappen? Do you think that's a right comparison to make, an early Verstappen and an early Antonelli?
I mean, every driver, particularly in their rookie year, they're going to make mistakes. All part of learning. They've all been there. You've said Max Verstappen, look, and people class him one of the best F1 drivers, if not the best F1 driver currently on the grid. But comparing him to Max, I don't think he's got the raw pace of Max Verstappen. Maybe he's going to prove me wrong in years to come. But I think Max is sensational. I think Antonelli is very good, and he's had a great success coming through the junior career, winning Italian F4, Formula Regional, back-to-back. That's Liam Lawson just going slightly wide on the exit of second Lesmo, kicking up a whole host of gravel, which scatters across the circuit. But I don't think he's quite on Max's level yet. There's still room there. There's still room for improvement. But Max is he's pretty special.
Well, there was a lot of chat about the Mercedes lineup for next year coming into, in the last few races with all that uncertainty around Max Verstappen. And while no official press release has been put out, Toto Wolff has said after the close of the Dutch Grand Prix that the 2026 lineup will be George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, which is pretty widely expected. 44 minutes and 34 seconds on the clock, and it is a busy track. All 20 drivers are out there, and they've now all set lap times. It's Albon fastest on the hard tyre, a 1:21.073, less than a tenth between him and Max Verstappen, who looks like he's about to go to the top of the time since he's coming round the Parabolica now. He's on the medium tyre, so we'll just wait for him to cross the line and see how that catapults him up across the line now for the Dutchman, and he does indeed go 3/10 clear of Albon, who is now second. Leclerc third, Norris fourth, Russell the top five with Hamilton, Alonso, Hadjar, Stroll and Tsunoda the top 10. Lawson's just come into the pits in 11th ahead of the two Saubers, Hulkenberg and Bortoletto. Behrman is 14th, make that 15th as Sainz rockets up to third in the timing tower. We've also got another FP1 driver out there in the form of Paul Aron. That's the noise of Pierre Gasly.
No, that's not fair from Sainz. It's always the same guy.
Gasly coming through the second Lesmo and backing off quite quickly. Wasn't happy with where Carlos Sainz was placing his Williams, and then there's a little bit of traffic management going on in the rundown towards the Ascari chicane. Sainz has jumped up to 13th, by the way. I should say we've got Paul Aron out there as well. He's in place of Franco Colapinto in the Alpine for FP1. We've seen Aron on loan from Alpine to Sauber a couple of times this year in FP1s. He's now getting his first Alpine run. Then after Hulkenberg in 15th comes Ocon, Gasly, Antonelli, then comes Paul Aron with Alex Dunn 20th and last. Less than 43 minutes left of FP1. Let's check in. Jenny, how you doing?
Yes, thank you. I've just seen Liam Lawson, as you say, come into the pit lane, just checked out how much gravel he took on board, cleaned him up a bit, and they've sent him back out. And it's interesting that you heard that radio message about Carlos Sainz, because it kicked off a little bit last time out with Sainz and Lawson, and Sainz picking up that penalty, which he felt was too dramatic maybe for the actual battle that they had, and I thought it was a good battle, a racing battle. I'd be interested to hear what Alice has to say. But coming up to this race, he was asked about it yesterday, and Williams have actually launched the right to appeal that and protest that penalty. So it was a heavy penalty, 10 seconds and 2 penalty points. So we'll see what happens next. They think they've got enough evidence to say that wasn't right, enough onboard evidence, all sorts of things that they back up, and they'll take it back to the stewards and see what they say. But it's interesting to hear the dialogue between them. Lawson saying actually he felt that Sainz should have come to him first rather than hanging it out in the media for us yesterday. But that's not what happened, and I think the two of them will move on fine. But I think there is a point of resentment, and a lot of question marks will happen this evening when the drivers get together as a 20 with the FIA and the stewards from this weekend, and they'll have a debate about it and about how driving standards need to maybe change for them.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Williams are challenging that Zandvoort penalty for Sainz, a right of review that they have, and a lot of the drivers, Alice, will be looking to see the outcome of that in a world now where we are dictated by driver guidelines. How did you read that incident? A racing incident? Should Lawson have had the penalty, or was it right for Sainz to be on the back end of that?
No, I think racing incident for me. I think that penalty, when I did see it pop up, I probably had the same reaction to what Sainz did. It's like, what? Have they just put the wrong graphic up? Is this a joke? I'm not surprised Williams have done the right to review, because then you could look at it as with the Leclerc and Russell incident. We've got a yellow flag on track, so we'll keep an eye on who may have stopped. Can't see on the driver tracker at the moment. That incident with Leclerc and Russell, that really damaged George Russell's floor, and he lost a lot of time from it. Again, it was a brave move around the outside. Was it off track? Was it not off track? I didn't see enough video evidence so I can't really comment, but how can then that be if it's damaged another car and it's fine? And then it's just all, even I'm like shaking my head sat here going, I would hate to be a steward. I really would. I would hate to have their job. They're going to have quite a few questions, I would expect, from a few of the drivers later on today, as Jenny said.
Yeah, we're just hearing and getting a replay of what that yellow flag was all about. I think it was Paul Aron coming into the De La Roja chicane, down through the gears, and gets the front right and the rear right wheel. I think I was just touching the grass, Alice, was it? And round he went.
I think it was, yeah. It's not as much as we saw Stroll do last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all good. Okay, that's the gravel at the exit.
That's the voice of the Estonian driver Paul Aron in place of Franco Colapinto this week, just for today's session, FP1, the 21-year-old from Tallinn. He's done a couple of FP1s with Sauber in Silverstone in Hungary, on loan from Alpine, where he acts as their reserve driver. He's currently down in 19th, along with the other FP1 driver, Alex Dunn, in place of Oscar Piastri. More on Williams in this right of review. Let's head to 5 Live Race Centre and bring in the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Afternoon, Andrew. This right of review is going to be quite important then, not only for Sainz, but I think for a lot of the other drivers to see what the outcome will be, if there is one.
Well, the problem with right reviews is that the FIA nearly always throws them out on some spurious grounds. Classic one was from McLaren last year, where they appealed on the basis of the stewards getting their original judgment wrong, and the answer coming back from the FIA was you can't bring the original judgment as evidence into your right to review. It's like, well, how does that work out? Anyway, on this incident between Sainz and Lawson, the issue is that they were looking at the racing guidelines and not looking at the reality of racing. So the racing guidelines say that for a driver overtaking on the outside to be allowed to be given space, or have to be expected space on the exit of the corner, he has to be fully alongside on the outside on the entry. Now, Sainz was not fully alongside on the entry. There's no question about that. But it's not as if he hung it around the outside halfway alongside and then Lawson just took his line on the exit. Lawson changed his line in the middle of the corner and basically drove into Sainz. And that's why Sainz is so angry. There was no need for Lawson to do that. And I think that's why Sainz thought it was completely incomprehensible. Lawson could have just stayed where he was and he would have had the right to run Sainz wide on the exit. Sainz would have had to give way at that point. But just change your line and drive into another car in the middle. That's why I think a lot of people in Formula 1 were slightly aghast as to the way the stewards judged that incident, regardless of what the racing guidelines say to the letter.
I agree with you, Andrew, and I think Lawson knew what he was doing. You don't change your line sort of without going, hang on, I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to make sure that he's not got the space there. So I think Lawson knew what he was doing. Again, maybe not. We'll have to ask him that question at some point. But usually, if you're changing a line in the middle of the corner like that, you've either got a huge kick of oversteer or something, or you know exactly what you're doing, especially in that sense when you're defending from the car behind.
Is Liam Lawson creating a bit of a reputation for himself as a sort of almost win it or bin it kind of driver? Because I look at that incident and I go, it was just unnecessary to happen. It was on a safety car restart. They were both running well inside the points, and actually the penalty was that, well, they both lost point scoring results in Zandvoort.
If you look through Lawson's career, he has always been sort of a driver that's been quite aggressive when he's come through F3 and F2. But obviously you're racing at the sharp end here in Formula 1 in terms of here to Bortoleto.
Yeah, Williams dropped something on in their pit box there. I almost hit it. I couldn't turn for our box properly.
That was Gabriel Bortoleto. There was something flying off from the one of the mechanics' sides when they were outside the Williams awaiting a driver to come into their pit box. That just made it a little bit tighter for Bortoleto to hit his marks, but no harm done there by the looks of things.
Yeah, so sorry, you're racing up the sharp end in terms of the best drivers in the world when you step into Formula One. They're wise to the tricks, and he doesn't have a great relationship, does he really, with Alonso, who's a wise old dog and knows pretty much all the tricks in the book. But yeah, he is quickly establishing himself with a reputation of being a little bit reckless, and he ruined his race, really. He could have easily given the room there, but we could be speaking for the remainder of this session on these driver guidelines on this topic, but we don't want to bore people.
Oh no, I've printed out the driver guidelines. I always have them here now, word for word, so we can always know exactly what to expect. It's not something we really want to define racing, is it? But sometimes it can work. But clearly, I think that incident between Sainz and Lawson in Zandvoort kind of highlights that. Well, there are plot holes in these guidelines, that it's not black and white for every single corner at every single track. Particularly when there's so much chat about apexes. Turn 1 at Tarzan, it's sort of a long sweeping corner that's quite heavily banked. You could even have a bit of a debate about where exactly the apex is of that corner.
But then, if you're talking about overtake on the outside of a corner, let's go to Singapore, or Baku, which we've got coming up. There's no room there for you to sort of run wide, because you're straight into a wall. So then do you have to totally back out, or just you should be entitled to space on the outside still if your front axle is not ahead. You shouldn't then be ran into the wall, or run into the wall.
That describes it. I find it funny, while we've been chatting about this, the only two cars out on track are Carlos Sainz and Liam Lawson. So Sainz in second, Lawson down in seventh, and actually they are on both the same stretch of circuit as well. But there's a bit of daylight between them. So majority in the pits then, I believe George Russell has just made his way out onto the track outside Mercedes now. I think that's where we find Jenny.
Yes, absolutely. As you say, George Russell was in the pits. They were doing some work, take off his front wing, and just having a look at that, messing about with I don't know what at the moment. It's hard to tell at this precise moment in time. And the mechanics and engineers aren't that keen to give you all the information, but he was in for about 5 minutes. Then they resealed the car up, put the sellotape over the seams, and then sent him on his way. And I'm just getting moved a little bit out of the way so that Kimi Antonelli can get his new tyres put on. They've given the whole car a bit of a clean down, so there's no rubbish on the front of it, make it go a little bit faster when it's cleaner. And I love looking at these skinny rear wings. They're just a thing of beauty. I know the DRS is affected by it. I don't care. They look great.
Yeah, they are. They do try and trim out as much as possible. Although one of the interesting things that some of the photographers and the journalists picked up on, particularly on the McLaren rear wing, is actually slightly thicker than it was last year. So they haven't taken out as much downforce as they can. I suppose they have a natural advantage over the rest of the field anyway, so not wanting to risk too much on that front. But that's quite an interesting sight that some of the photographers picked up on. Just on Mercedes, Russell's down at 11th at the moment on an outlap now. He's out there on the medium tyre. Antonelli is in the pits. Speaking of young drivers like Liam Lawson in his first full season with Racing Bulls, his teammate Isaac Hadjar picking up his first Grand Prix podium last time out. I mean, what a sensational result that was, Alice, wasn't it, for Hadjar?
It was. I mean, it was inherited, well, I'm saying inherited, but step forward due to, of course, Norris dropping out of the race, but he had to be there. He put up a good challenge from the field behind, and I think he had a fantastic race. And he has been, so far, I would say, rookie of the season for me personally. He's had solid showings. He's sort of constantly been around there in the top 10 quite often. And he did become the 219th driver to finish on a Formula One podium.
You had that up your sleeve, didn't you?
Yeah, full of them today.
I will raise you that, and give you 5th youngest podium finisher in history. Pretty decent, Jenny, isn't it, for the 20-year-old from Paris? And now, well, it looks like he's going to be demoted to Red Bull imminently.
I love that. He's saying that actually going to Red Bull next year will be a new start because there are new regulations, which means basically new aero, new engine rules. It's a total reset, so he doesn't see it as such a trauma, and he hopes that he can integrate himself with the team. And I think it would be a great team with Max Verstappen and Isaac Hadjar, or Isaac. I don't know which we're meant to be saying. I'm just going to stick with Isaac because that's the way we've said it all season. There was some debate as to whether it's Isaac or Isaac these days. If you're French, say it the French way. If you're British, I'm just sticking with Isaac. And just to say, the deal hasn't been done. Nothing's been announced, but that's what the rumours are in the paddock. And it was really nice. I don't know if you saw what happened to Isaac Hadjar's trophy, but it was like a giant egg cup, and the stem broke in two. So he just had the cup bit, which he celebrated with, which was nice. But they've presented him with a new third place trophy here in Monza, and he had some pictures taken with it. And it's a thing of beauty, but clearly quite fragile.
Yes, clearly. I think I'm not sure he'll care too much. They'll replace that, won't they? And they'll get him a replica one as Verstappen goes fastest. And it was Verstappen who was ahead of him, but not by much for the majority of the Dutch Grand Prix. Just highlighting how well not only that Racing Bulls car was running, because on pure performance and pace, Hadjar qualified fourth and would have finished fourth had Norris not retired. So that in itself would have been a great result. And then a little bit of luck going his way to be there to pounce on a McLaren retiring and getting the podium. I mean, fantastic. Less than half an hour remaining, by the way. Verstappen has put on the soft tyre, gone fastest by less than 2/10 to Carlos Sainz, who was out there on the hard tyre. He's in the pits, though. Then it's Leclerc. Albon, Hadjar is 5th ahead of Alonso. Lawson is 7th ahead of Hamilton. Norris and Stroll, the top 10, with Russell and Hülkenberg, the top 12. Bortoletto is 13th ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Kimi Antonelli is 15th. Alex Dunn in place of Oscar Piastri, and the McLaren is 16th ahead of Behrman. Then it's Gasly, Ocon and Aron, 18th to 20th, with a mix of cars now coming back out from the pit lane. So soft tyre runs going on as the track ramps up.
No grip. This is slide a lot.
So I say the track ramps up, not for Max Verstappen.
I was just, we were listening there to the onboard of Charles Leclerc from the visor cam, and he set a blistering first sector and then just totally backed off in the second sector. He was 0.2 of a second quicker than Max Verstappen, who takes top spot at the moment. So I'm not sure why. There was no real mistake from Charles Leclerc, but decided that he was not going to continue to push that lap. We're seeing a few more drivers head out on the soft tyre. Obviously, Charles out there at the moment. Hadjar's out there, so I think this order's going to change slightly, but Max not feeling at home. He was fastest in free practice 1 here last year with a 1:21.676. Track temperatures are slightly cooler, nearly 10 degrees cooler than they were here last year. Alex Albon, he's got a little bit of understeer through the first part of Lesmo, and then just dips a wheel on the second part. He's got lots of traffic in front of him as well, kicks up some gravel, but it was a new surface here last year. It's had 1 year's worth of running, Formula 1 support races, other categories, GTs, plenty of other things that come to Monza throughout the last 12 months. So the surface would have had a smoothing out slightly, would have had a year of being bedded in essentially. So deg might not be as high, certainly with the not as high temperatures as well, but Max still clearly struggling out there. But Sainz, I just want to point on him, he's set his time on the hard tyre.
Yeah.
And he's still in P2. He's not been jumped as yet.
Unlucky, obviously, not to get points last time out with the incident with Lawson that we were discussing about. So he seems like he's imminently due a return back to the points. He hasn't actually scored any since Canada, 6 races ago. And Sainz actually sitting down in 17th in the Drivers' Championship, whilst teammate Alex Albon is flying. He's actually joint on points with Kimi Antonelli in 8th spot. what a mega lap it was on lap 1 for Alex Albon in Zandvoort. From 15th on the grid, he gained about 5 places, as Hadjar says, check the floor. I think he's had a little run-off somewhere on the curb and into the gravel as he makes his way back to the pits now, does the French rookie driver. But Williams needing those points crucially to keep themselves that little bit of distance away from Aston Martin in 6th spot. Williams have 80 points. They lie 5th in the Constructors' Championship. 18 points behind are Aston Martin, who are only 2 ahead of Racing Bulls, who are only 9 ahead of Sauber, who are only 7 ahead of Haas, who are 24 ahead of Alpine. So that is a really tight fight, literally worth millions of dollars in prize money at the end of the season.
Just catching a replay of Isaac Hadjar running wide at Ascari, the first part of Ascari, uphill braking there. It lures you in to carry lots of speed in, and it does tighten up on the exit, and he was just a bit too eager into 8, which then feeds immediately into turn 9, ran across the gravel, and we do have a red flag.
We do have a red flag out there. Just trying to have a quick look to see who it might be. So red flag, everybody must come to a slow and head back to the pits. That'll be session stopped, and it's due to gravel, I think. A lot of gravel being kicked up by Hadjar, running through
turn 9, yeah,
the gravel at Ascari, and I think they just want to get the marshals on track and sweep that gravel away. So we see this at these kind of older school tracks where we still get those gravel runoff punishments. The downside of it is, well, we might just have to sweep the track every now and then. And Antonelli was another victim recently coming through. I think it was at the second Lesmo. Also coming out of the Della Rettifilio chicane as well. And Ascari just really pushing the limits of that Mercedes car and kicking up a bit of gravel as a result. But he is not the only one.
I would rather have the Lando Norris going across the gravel there on the exit of turn 7. I'd rather have the gravel issue. I still am a firm believer and enjoy these old school circuits, not these I'm not going to call them Mickey Mouse, that's not the right word, but these ones where you're not punished if you run wide. Isaac was on a really good lap there, set a challenging first and middle sector, but just was a bit too keen on the exit of turn 8, and he was punished, whereas at some other circuits he probably wouldn't have been punished. But that's part and parcel of driving a race car on the very limit.
Yeah, that's another mistake from Lando Norris in the Lesmo. So pushing the limits as all the cars still trying to make their way back to the track. FP1 red flag, so the clock continues to count down. But the pit lane starts to get a little bit busier, and that's where we find Jenny Gow.
Certainly does. Lewis Hamilton's just been wheeled back into his side of the garage, and now Charles Leclerc gets wheeled back into his other side of the garage. They both were on the soft red branded tyres, and I think they were all looking to set some hot laps, and that's a tricky position and a tricky time for a red flag to fall, because now what do? These tyres have been used, they've been more than strubbed in for most of the teams, so they have to have a think about what they want to do. Do they want to send them back out? Do they want to take another set? They are limited with the amount of sets they get across the weekend, so every decision they make this time out has some sort of implication on their race strategy and their strategy for qualifying. But when it comes to this race, it's a very long pit lane, maybe 23-25 seconds for a pit stop. So that would indicate that teams will probably just want to stop once unless something crazy happens like last weekend. So maybe they'll be lucky and be able to save a tyre for that. Maybe the softs we won't see in the race at all. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that was a tricky situation. I don't know what to do. I broke as hard as possible when I saw the red flag, but it wasn't enough to stay behind the Sauber.
Charles Leclerc immediately trying to explain his position when overtaking a Sauber with a red flag out on track. Alice, what did you make of that? We just saw a replay of it now.
I mean, if he does get a penalty for that, it's extremely harsh. The Sauber was going particularly slowly going into turn 5, the Della Roja chicane, and all that Charles was doing was on a push lap, and the red flag came out, so the board on the right hand side to Charles Leclerc was illuminated, and he had no chance of stopping and not overtaking the Sauber. We are listening to the Racing Bulls all surrounding, or mechanics in the Racing Bulls garage, surrounding Isaac Hadjar and taping, by the looks of it, his floor back together. Lots of tape, lots of work, lots of glue as well down there. Riding on board with him now into turn 8. Just carries too much in. Yeah, that was just a little bit too greedy from Hadjar, and that is one thing to watch out for in during the race and qualifying as well. That gravel can really do damage, and we've seen it with a damaged floor at numerous races this year, what effect it can have to your pace.
Yeah, Monza can bite with those gravel traps. While the cars all make their way back to the pits now, red flag, before we wait for the gravel to be cleared. That red flag infringement by Charles Leclerc has been noted by race control. And on Leclerc, well, we were chatting with Jenny about the potential pit stop strategy. It was Charles Leclerc who managed to do a one-stop strategy here last year to win. So, Andrew Benson, BBC F1 correspondent, he's returning to happy hunting ground, is Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, although he's not having a very happy day, is he, Harry? That's, I mean, he'll be very nervous about that red flag incident. Let's not forget that there's already one Ferrari with a 5-place grid penalty this weekend for a red flag infringement. That was a double wave yellow flag infringement on the formation laps, in reconnaissance laps, I should say, in Zandvoort last weekend. And I think Hamilton was a little bit bemused by that penalty. In fact, he said he was shocked yesterday when he found out about it when he got home to Monaco after the race, because he felt he'd slowed under those double waved yellow flags. He had slowed, and the stewards acknowledged that, but they felt that he hadn't slowed enough. And now you've got a similar situation with Leclerc. You know, he's, as Alice was pointing out, on a flying lap there. That's 2 flying laps Leclerc has had to abort after the first sector for various reasons on those soft tyres that he's just put on, having set a purple first sector time. But you never quite know how the stewards are going to judge these incidents. You know, he's saying I braked as hard as I could, and I still ended up going past the Sauber. Will the stewards believe him? So he's got a nervous wait to find out about that one after the session.
If he gets a penalty, the world's gone mad.
And the Tifosi will be up in arms. Go on, Andrew.
We're discussing that the world's gone a bit mad, haven't we? with regard to Liam Lawson and Carlos Sainz, and maybe even Lewis Hamilton. So that's what I mean by you can't second guess what the stewards are going to do in these situations.
You can't. One Ferrari driver is not in his car. I think he's just gone for a comfort break. Lewis Hamilton was running through to the back of the garage there, keeping himself hydrated during the session. Some drivers just choose to go in the seat, but he's done the right thing and not do that. That is what he's needed. And yeah, we're just catching a replay of that red flag infringement. It's going to be looked at after the end of the session. Leclerc was putting his hands up, his radio again.
I let him pass, but I think because it was red flag, he wouldn't pass again.
I think if he would have had to absolutely slammed on the brakes. And usually in a red flag, you're meant to stop in a controlled manner or slow down in a controlled manner. So if he did slam on the brakes, he wasn't going to be slowing down in controlled manner by the closing speed of him coming up to the back of that Sauber.
But we could see how frustrated he was at that, because he quite gesticulated with his hands quite a lot, almost touching the screen on his steering wheel. He's actually just thrown something out of his cockpit as well as he gears back up in the pit lane, because the session will get underway in less than 15 seconds time. We are just taking a look at a replay from before the red flag with Pierre Gasly.
I think it's the second time Williams is on the line to push, so I need to overtake the people if they can help with that before we get an incident.
I think that's fair enough from Pierre Gasly. He's coming around the Parabolica, and it's the other Williams this time with Alex Albon, who was going incredibly slowly on the racing line.
On the exit of Parabolica, your mid to exit there, the corner's actually so long that essentially it's blind. And if you do catch a car just dawdling on the racing line when you'll be hitting over 130 plus, that's quite dangerous. But a queue of cars that are being released at the end of the pit lane now. Harry, we've got the green light.
No, apparently no further action from race control on Charles Leclerc and that incident after he overtook a Sauber as the red flag came out. He was on a quick lap, the Sauber on a very slow one, and even applying the brakes wasn't enough for Charles Leclerc to avoid overtaking him, and race control had clearly agreed that the Ferrari man didn't quite have a case to answer in that case. So a moment of relief then for Charles Leclerc, I think is fair to say, and the Tifosi in the grandstands can all now breathe a sigh of relief on that one.
Can you imagine if he's got a 5-place grid penalty for that, and that'll be both Ferraris with the penalty. Oscar Piastri watches on the pit wall because Alex Dunn is occupying his seat, who's down in 16th at the moment. And why do I sound surprised at that? Because he was up in the top 5 when he was last out in Austria. He's one of the stars of Formula 2 this year. He's a rookie. He's currently 5th in the standings in Formula 2, but probably, I would say, should be leading the championship. He's had a couple of infringements that, particularly one that springs to mind with the Spa, where he wasn't in the correct start race mode because it was starting under safety car. He didn't realise that he still had to be in that mode. Won the race, a great drive, and then was excluded at the end of it. So that was 25 points lost. So it's an exciting season in Formula 2, and Alex Dunn is certainly a part of that.
Yeah, he is, but down in 16th at the moment. But he's out there, Jetty, on the soft tyres. So too Paul Aron. I'm just frantically trying to see where Aron is on the timing speed. He's actually last at the moment, but he's out there on the soft tyre. So looks like people are going out for some quick runs.
Yeah, I think they were all queuing down the pit lane, apart from Lewis Hamilton with his comfort brake. He's only just left the Ferrari garage right now. They were just waiting to be able to get out there and set some fast laps with just 14 minutes of this session remaining. Just a word on Alex Dunn. Alice, I wondered, he'd just gone his F2 session, my mistake, and then climbed in the car to do his F1 P1 session. Is that an advantage, a disadvantage, a bit of both? I just wondered how you view it.
It depends how quickly he is to adapting back to Formula 2 machinery. He gets track time, and track time's track time, right? But if I'm throwing back to Austria, he was fastest in Formula 2 practice, or at least in the top 3. He did his session in Formula 1, and then he had not a great qualifying when he went back to Formula 2. And when I spoke to Warren Hughes, who runs the driver development program for McLaren, I think it literally was just struggling to adapt back to Formula 2 machinery. There's a lot less downforce on a Formula 2 car, is less grip. So having to then go back to a car that is from a Formula 1 car to a car with less grip, and in Formula 2 qualifying sessions literally 30 minutes, and there was a couple of red flags, I think, potentially as well. So some drivers adapt better than others, but he'll be hoping that he's learnt from Austria and will be able to adapt back quite quickly. But Charles Leclerc still got life in his soft tyre. He's just gone fastest of anybody in the first sector, a real strong middle sector as well. So he holds it together, Harry, at the end of this lap, coming through Parabolica, running all the way out to the white line, keeping it nice and smooth, flicks open the DRS. This should promote him to the top of the times.
Finds 0.4 of a second to Charles Leclerc and does go fastest. But we are going to see some quick soft tyre runs coming over the course of the next couple of minutes into the last quarter of this free practice 1 session. Now 12 minutes and 16 seconds remain as we kick off the Italian Grand Prix weekend, and we are getting a lock-up from the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli down into turn 1. Front right lock-up has to take to the runoff, cuts the chicane, and kicks up a bit of gravel for good measure as well. Antonelli out there on the soft tyre, but down in 15th at the moment. Try and fight another day on that one. Hamilton, after his comfort break or espresso break, although no, it's afternoon, isn't it now? That will be sacrilege if you oh no, you can have an espresso, you can't have a milky coffee, that's it. You can't have a cappuccino or a latte in the afternoon of Ferrari in Italy. I made that mistake once and got a pretty scour look when I ordered a cappuccino.
Well, I would
past 1 o'clock.
Awful looks because I don't like coffee.
I almost feel like that might be better than ordering a milky coffee in the afternoon in Italy. I think
maybe.
Producer Joe is asking about pineapple on pizza. Is that sacrilege?
I do like pineapple on pizza.
Whoa!
I do. I know. So I don't like coffee, but I like pineapple on pizza.
Look, Alice Powell, it's been so great to have you part of the commentary team. It's a shame we have to end things now. Thank you so much for your time. 11 minutes remaining of free practice one, and Antonelli is back out there, personal best in set to 1 and set to 2 as he races down towards the straight that leads you to the Parabolica. Williams in the form of Alex Albon, nicely out of the way, and a Sauber actually as well of Paul Aron, both getting out of the way, of Gabriel Bortoleto. I'm used to Aron being in that Sauber. He's now in the Alpine. Antonelli across the line, does improve, but not by much, taking a bit too much out of those soft tyres when he locked up, perhaps. Up into 13th spot, 1.1 seconds adrift. It's Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton the top 3, Sainz, Albon the top 5, with Russell, Hadjar, Alonso, Tsunoda and Stroll the top 10. Liam Lawson is 11th ahead of Lando Norris. Antonelli is 13th. Then come the two Sauber drivers of Hulkenberg and Bortoleto. Dunn is down in 16th. Then comes Pierre Gasly. Esteban Ocon's Haas is 18th. Ollie Behrman is the sound you're hearing right now. It's a replay. Was he just getting in the way of Alex Dunn coming out of the second Lesmo? No, Dunn was going at a rapid rate of knots. Finds Behrman.
What is Behrman doing? Behrman impeded me. Not that it matters to me, but later on in the weekend for you guys.
Yeah, understood. Been noted.
He did impede him, and if Behrman qualifies up with the McLarens, if of course they do qualify up the front, where they should be qualifying at the front, then fair play to Behrman.
Well, fair play to Behrman. He's down in 19th. He's come back into the pits. Traffic can be a little bit of a thing here, particularly in the middle sector, and everybody wanting to try and get maybe a bit of an edge, a bit of a toe as well. Qualifying, we've seen, I think it was at 2018, 2019, where it was an absolutely chaotic qualifying, and only Carlos Sainz got a lap on the board as Bortoleto puts that Sauber up in 10th. Aron is 20th and last at the moment in that Alpine. On Behrman though, career best result last time out, 6th place from pit lane to P6. An overdue good result, I think, for the British rookie.
Yes, it was a very solid result from him, and he's got success at this track. Okay, maybe not in Formula 1, but in Formula 2. He won the feature race here in 2023 and the sprint race last year in 2024, so he should have a good result here this weekend in terms of enjoyment of the circuit. It was great for him actually coming through, and they're doing all right, aren't they? They're doing a solid job at the moment, and actually another team that are doing a fairly solid job, I think, recently anyway, talking about last weekend, is Aston Martin, and they've scored 26 points over the last 2 Grand Prix, which is more than any other team other than Mercedes, who have scored 28, and McLaren, who have scored 68. So if you look at it like that, those stats are okay. It's only 2 Grand Prix, the last 2 Grand Prix. It's not so bad.
No, but it's so encouraging, isn't it? Particularly for Fernando Alonso. Points in 6 of the last 7 races. It's Alonso we can hear at the moment, by the way. A replay approaching the Ascari chicane, down through the gears into the left-hander. There's the sound of the gravel as he runs over and has to cut a bit of the chicane and leaves a plume of smoke behind him for the Red Bull of Max Verstappen to absorb. But Alonso, having not scored for the opening, I think, how many races did he go without points? Did Fernando Alonso? He didn't score any points until Spain. So he went 8 races before he scored a point this year. Which I think was, if not tied for, the longest streak in his career. Points now in 6 of the last 7 races. And even on Lance Stroll's side of the garage, he's finished 7th in 3 of the last 4 races. He's actually ahead of Alonso in the Drivers' Championship, 11th and 12th, but they are literally separated by just 2 points. It's really encouraging for a team that looked really on the back foot. If we cast our minds back to the beginning of this ground effect era, where Alonso was coming out with podiums and Aston Martin were almost the second best team at one point, and then they have gone backwards, now on the brink of becoming the Honda Works factory team for next year. They'll replace the Mercedes engine with a Honda power unit. This is really positive signs, and signs that Alonso had to see almost.
Yes, I think Alonso, you can tell when he comes over on the radio, he's quite frustrated with decisions at times, but they are up and down, aren't they? But I'm really excited to see how they get on next year. Obviously that Honda power unit potentially, but more really because of Adrian Newey with his brain. We'd all love to have Adrian Newey's brain, hugely clever and obviously a big part of Red Bull's success. It'll be interesting to see how they get on, and I think that could be one of the reasons why we're still seeing Alonso sort of putting up with maybe feeling a little bit decisions going more to Stroll's direction than his. We've heard him say plenty of times on the radio about that. But Lewis Hamilton is on the soft tyre, and he's just set a personal best in the middle sector, which is actually not too far away from Charles Leclerc, who's the fastest in the first sector, and Lewis Hamilton has just set the fastest middle sector overall of anyone, 0.02 of a second quicker at the moment on this lap than Charles Leclerc. So could it be, I know it's free practice 1, but maybe could we see Ferrari challenging for pole position when it comes to tomorrow's qualifying?
Well, Lewis Hamilton will obviously have that 5-place grid penalty, so it won't be him. But look, I actually think I think Jolyon Palmer said this on our Checkered Flag preview show, as Hamilton does go to the top by over a 1/10 and a half, a 1:20.117. It's Ferrari 1-2 towards the end of free practice 1.
The Tifosi are loving it.
They're up on their feet in the grandstands. Take a picture, screenshot that. Fred Vasseur on the pit wall takes a
sip of
water.
from him as well.
Yeah, not giving too much away, and still a lot of concentration going on in the Ferrari team garage. But Hamilton with the soft tyre on, going to the top of the times, and out there with that Ferrari looking splendid in the sunshine here in Monza, with that tribute livery to Niki Lauda, a dollop of white on the engine cover and the airbox, and even the design of the number and the driver name in the same style as Niki Lauda's 1975 winning Ferrari. This is the sound of George Russell, just going quite slowly on the approach to the Rettifilo chicane, just getting out of the way of a bit of traffic here, and then unfortunately locking up and having to take to the runoff area.
Didn't follow race director's instructions. He's going to get a slap on the wrist.
No, Hadjar didn't do that either earlier. They'll be okay in FP1, because when you run off at the De La Rocha chicane, actually, I should say, so turns 4 and 5, if you run off there is almost like a sort of yellow escape road that you have to follow, which then kicks you out just sort of on the way to turn 6. It's a bit of an awkward re-entry to the track, I think, because you suddenly find yourself on the inside approaching the right-hander of 6, the first of the Lesmos.
I heard a strange noise with the turbo, I think, on this lap.
Okay, we're checking.
So that's Liam Lawson hearing a strange noise on his engine. So that's dictated in the race director's notes, as you say, Alice. So too in the Rettifilo chicane, turns 1 and 2, there are, I think it's about 4 sets of polystyrene boards that you must weave your way in between to rejoin on the exit of turn 2, as you then rejoin for 3 in the Curva Grande. But it does stipulate for the Rettifilo chicane, I don't think it did for the De La Rocha, that obviously if you are unable to do that, then it's okay, but it's got to be sort of obvious that you were unable to do that. Right, coming to the closing points of this free practice 1 session, 2 minutes and 18 seconds remain. Jenny Gow, what more do you bring?
Yes, I've just been at House watching the drivers come in and then go out again. Very, very long hold for Ollie Behrman. It took about 3 minutes to be able to actually be released from his garage from the engineers and the mechanics. So not sure exactly what was going on. It wasn't ideal, but yeah, they're both back out on track. And just to say, there are no more real upgrades coming to any of the races for any of the teams now. The full focus is switched on to next year. And that gives us some interesting background coming into races, because you can tell which races will suit a car and which might not. And this is one of the races traditionally that favours Ferrari, but also favours Williams, because they don't have much downforce. So actually, when you trim out the downforce, they go well, and they don't have much downforce to trim out. So that's why this weekend is such a good opportunity for Williams to add to their points. So they'll be looking for Albon and Sainz to make the most of this opportunity. For them, securing 5th place is so important next year as well. All the money that it would receive, but it's so nip and tuck in that midfield, as you said, Harry, that let's see what they do this weekend.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You're absolutely right. On paper, this is the most successful track in the turbo hybrid era for Williams. But I wonder, Alice, as the team has naturally gotten more competitive, does that kind of eliminate how strong their hold was on this track? As there is a lovely bit of traffic down at the chicane. We've got a car stopped. It's George Russell's Mercedes on the inside as we approach the chicane, the De La Roja chicane. He's half the car is on the grass. He doesn't look like he's hit anything.
Oh, I've lost power.
He's lost power, George Russell reports. And it got very tight for a Sauber and a Red Bull as a result, going into the De La Roja chicane just ahead of him. But the virtual safety car is out with less than 20 seconds remaining of the session. So a loss of power for Mercedes. That's going to all but seal a Ferrari 1-2.
Mercedes issue. We had one of those last weekend, didn't we?
Well,
slightly different by the sounds of it.
Yeah, we've had a few. That was a McLaren chassis issue, I think, which sort of voided Mercedes' responsibility on that one for Lando Norris. But Mercedes have had a few technical issues. I think back to Kimi Antonelli in Imola. I think he had a bit of an issue, didn't he, on his Mercedes? And we've seen Aston Martin, I think Fernando Alonso in Monaco, Williams and Alex Albon had an issue, I want to say Canada. But that has allowed the clock to chime down to 0, and the checkered flag is out. So nobody will be going faster now because the virtual safety car is out for George Russell's stricken Mercedes with a potential power unit issue, reporting power loss. So it's Ferrari 1 and 2 at the end of free practice 1 to kickstart the Italian Grand Prix weekend. It's Lewis Hamilton, just over a 10th clear of Charles Leclerc. It's Carlos Sainz, who I think will still be held very fondly in the minds of Tifosi, 3rd for the Williams. Then it's Verstappen 4th, Antonelli 5th, Norris is 6th ahead of Albon, Russell 8th, then Alonso and Hadjar, the top 10. The two Saubers, Bortoleto and Hulkenberg, make up the top 12. Liam Lawson is 13th, ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Lance Stroll is 15th. Alex Dunn completing his second free practice 1 outing for McLaren before he returns to Formula 2 this weekend. The Irish driver finishing 16th at 1.4 seconds down. Ocon 17th, Gasly 18th, Behrman 19th, with Paul Aron in his FP1 session in for Franco Colapinto in his Alpine, 20th and last, as George Russell gets out of the car and walks away. And we're going to hear and see what happened to Russell. So out of the Rettifilo chicane, up through the gears, into the Curva Grande, which arcs to the right-hand side. Let's have a listen. And that didn't sound like a particularly big issue.
I've lost my
okay.
Rears are blocked. I'm stuck in 7th.
Okay. So rears are blocked. I'm stuck in 7th. So as he pulled off to the side, and then there was almost an incident for the Sauber ahead, who was also going quite slowly, nearly approaching the apex on the inside at the De La Roja chicane, and Yuki Tsunoda was the Red Bull coming in hot behind him and just about avoided Nico Hulkenberg's Sauber there as Russell was pulling off and having his accident. So, not the start Mercedes would have wanted for Russell there, but FP1, so still a chance to bounce back and recover for free practice 2, which we'll be back for a little later on this afternoon on Sports Extra. You can find us there. That session will get going at 4 o'clock. The green light will come on this afternoon, but good start, Alice, for the two Ferraris.
A very good start, and a good start for Williams, one of the Williams anyway. Carlos Sainz, he's half a second shy of Lewis Hamilton, who's at top of the times. Lewis Hamilton's on the grid doing a practice start now. Verstappen, he's just over 5.5 tenths back of Hamilton. And then Antonelli, he's had a better free practice. Well, he only did one free practice last year, stepping in, of course, in that Mercedes seat, but he's had a good free practice one here. Norris is in 6th, 9 tenths off. I know, again, reminder, still free practice one, but we're not used to seeing a McLaren 9 tenths of a second off.
No, we're not, but always the stipulation for fuel loads and whatnot. Isaac Hadjar also, did he have a bit of a moment coming through the same chicane just after Russell, and was told not to overtake because the virtual safety car came up, and Hadjar very calmly, yeah, you don't need to worry, you don't need to shout. I remember you and I, Alice, commentating the Formula 3 Championship decider a couple of years ago with Isaac Hadjar.
Do you want to do the impression of him?
It was very high-pitched when he binned his car into the gravel during qualifying in what ultimately decided was a big factor in deciding that championship there. But Hadjar has come a long way in those few years since Formula 3, Formula 2 in the interim, and now making waves in Formula 1. Right, thank you very much, Jenny Gow, Andrew Benson, Alice Powell. If you're looking for something to do in between now and FP2, you can head to BBC Sounds and listen to the Checkered Flag preview show with Jenny, Andrew Benson and Jolyon Palmer, and then join us again, green light, 4 o'clock on Sports Extra for FP2. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.